As our proposition today, we think there's a specific reason why politics means people talk. We think that there's a reason why when democracy started in ancient Greece, everyday people gathered around a fountain to debate and discuss issues. We think this was extremely highly representative of the people. We think it had no barriers to entry, which meant that anyone could show up. Moreover, we think that over time, politics has become complicated to the point that it is no longer adequately representative. We think there are barriers of entry, and moreover, we think it's very hard to get into politics, and it's very hard to make a change if you actually do manage to do this. That's why we as Side Proposition today argue that our policy will best return us to a politics of a representative nature, and that is the burden we put upon ourselves today. So in terms of the definition, what we're going to do today is basically replace the entirety of Parliament within this kind of representative lottery system. What this means is that it will have a lottery in which individuals are selected from a specific group based on their race and gender in order for the final group of people selected to match the proportion of race and gender within society. So in terms of the case split, I'll be dealing with this idea of like the policy quickly, then the efficacy of the current system, and lastly I'll deal with this idea of the capacity of normal people within society to fulfill this mandate. My second speaker will continue our case with this idea of decreasing political apathy, and secondly she'll look at this idea of decreasing the barrier to entry within politics. So without further ado, thank you. I'm going to go straight onto this policy quickly just to clear up a couple of ideas. So basically what we're going to do is replace the entire system of Parliament with different people. So currently we see that if a party receives 60% of votes, they get 60% of the seats in Parliament. What we want to do is change this so that the people put into Parliament are actually there as a representative basis of their specific race and gender, rather than this. And they'll be chosen at complete random. So we think that this is going to be very effective in terms of actually making a change here. And what we want to see is that we think that Parliament plays a role in deciding like specific policies which directly impact the people within society. We think it's extremely important to establish in today's debate. We think government plays a role in actually making sure that these are implemented and enforced within society, and that's a role that we're putting government to in this kind of debate. No, thank you. So we aren't actually removing government's ability to make a change within society, we're only removing their specific ability to put people into Parliament. So the last thing we think is that we think that Parliament has a role in things such as votes of no confidence, issues such as the secrecy bill, but I'll speak about this later on in my speech. So we want to quickly clarify that the people who will be chosen will be given some kind of compensation for actually playing their role in Parliament, and we think it's extremely important to note that it's kind of the same system as the jury system we have currently. So with that concluded, I'm going to go straight into this idea of the efficacy of the current system we have. The conclusion to this point is that currently Parliament doesn't allow for true representation due to the nature that it has of how they actually select these people. So what we as Side Proposition have an issue with is how members are chosen within this kind of thing. So what happens, like I said earlier, is when we vote for a specific party, they will then choose who will take up our seats in Parliament. We think this has two tangible issues with regard to our actual efficiency of Parliament. Firstly, we think that people are often chosen due to the fact that they're liked a lot, due to the fact that they're good politicians, rather than the fact that they're good at representing people. The problem here is that it means that race and gender is often very irrelevant in terms of how they're chosen, and often their ability to actually make sure they do something is completely irrelevant. Now, we do concede to the fact that we do have a quota within society currently, but we think this actually plays in our favour. What this does is it shows that the government does care about having some kind of representation. We only want to further extend it because we don't think it's effective enough in terms of representing minorities, in terms of representing the people that actually need some kind of representation. And let's look at the second half that we have here. And this is the idea that once they're chosen by this kind of party, they're accountable to the party and the party's ideals, rather than to the people that they're meant to be representing. We think this is a huge problem within this kind of system. So basically it means that whoever holds the most seats in Parliament is going to be able to overrule any idea due to the fact that they have this kind of power and due to the fact that they know exactly what they want within society. So we think that no changes can happen within this kind of policy, but in my second point I'll actually speak about how our policy will affect this. So what I'm going to ask now is what does this actually mean for Parliament and why is this such a negative thing? So we have issues such as the secrecy bill, which has been named Black Tuesday for a specific reason because there was no legitimate justification to the people. We have issues such as e-tolls. The problem here is that we can see that most of society did not support these ideas. The reason why they were put in place is because Parliament represented the party's ideals rather than actually looking at what society wanted and what society needed. So the conclusion to this kind of idea is basically that it isn't allowing for proper representation within Parliament or any good representation at all. The last thing I want to quickly put in here is that we don't think we actually get a change in the people in Parliament. What's happening is people often when a party comes into power, they often stay in power for a very long time, and that often means that the people that they put into Parliament are going to represent their own ideals for a very long time. Our policy allows for a change in people, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this, every 5 years with the normal kind of system, but it allows for a change in people, which means that they're actually going to be able to make a change when a change is necessary, rather than sticking to the same specific ideal when a party does stay in power for so long. So, with that concluded, I'm going to move on to this next idea, which is basically strategically important to prove because it actually shows how our motion will work. And this is this idea of the capacity of our own society and people within society to change the problems that we have. The conclusion here is that the nature of Parliament dictates that a normal member of society can fulfill the role of Parliament, especially with regard to this idea of race and gender specifically. So, firstly, we don't think that government in power has to actually be involved in the decision-making process with regard to Parliament. We think that their job is to enforce and implement these kind of things, and that's the difference that we have here. The things that Parliament is deciding on directly impact society, and I'll speak about why this is so important now. So, we need to quickly ask what makes an effective member of Parliament. We think there are two things. Firstly, you understand what issues need to be dealt with, and secondly, you actually care about what impacts these changes are going to have within society and within your own specific groups. So what we think here is that a general member of society isn't someone who analyzes what problems could be an issue. People who actually experience them, and people who actually care about what will happen if you change specific things and if you take away specific things. What this actually means is that whatever choice they make will directly impact themselves and their own lives as well as the people around them, and it means that they directly have like some kind of self-invested interest in making sure they make the right decision, not just what the party wants for that. So the conclusion here is we think a general person is already better in terms of making sure the right decision is made. But now we're going to look at the length why it's so specifically important to have race and gender as another factor here. And what we think is that despite the fact you can already relate more with a member of society due to that specific thing, we think that race and gender gives you that extra edge that is very necessary. So what we think here is that race and gender often dictates your place within society, how people react to you and how you react to specific things, because we do think it has an important role in how things work. For example, we look at Lindiwe Mazibuko in terms of politics. We think she's given severe criticism in terms of the fact that she's a woman, which often downgrades her actual ability to be good at things, simply because of the fact that she's firstly black and secondly a woman. The reason why we think this is so important to analyse is because we think it's often what happens within general society, and this is often where the representation is lacking. So what we want is representation of not only majority groups, which is what is happening currently, but we also want minority groups to be involved here. What we want is from people within society to actually think, there is a problem with my own community, I want to deal with it, and actually do something about it, rather than thinking, well, there's a minority group, but it doesn't actually affect my abilities to get votes for my party, therefore we won't change any policies here, and that's a problem. So what we can conclude here is, first of all, a general person from society is already a bet than someone like a random politician put into place by a party, and second, we can conclude that when they're chosen by like a random lottery, because of race and gender, they're an even better choice. So in terms of actually upholding true representation, I think that this motion can only fall with side proposition. Thank you.